TNKR Media.
Welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs Montreal by BDO Canada. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Mike Newton of BDO. Welcome back, Mike.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Today, we really have a titan in the Montreal business and academic community. His name is Frantz Saintellemy. He's the president and COO of Leddartech, and he is also the Chancellor of Université de Montréal. He co-founded a BIPOC entrepreneur incubator called Groupe 3737, so we're going to talk to him about that as well, but certainly one of our more prestigious and one of our busier guests on Inspiring Entrepreneurs Montreal.
My biggest problem with this show is where to start and where to take it in a direction. I mean, there's so many ways to take this. Our show is usually pretty clear as to how we're going to address it and what topic we're going to go and what direction, but man, there's just a lot on our plate here today.
Yeah, so Leddartech does systems for road safety using AI and environmental monitoring. He'll get into the details. It's a bit complicated. Born out of his experience as an electrical engineer. Then, of course, he was appointed recently as Chancellor of UDM, so he's the head of the board there. And he co-founded this entrepreneur incubator called 3737, which focuses on Black and Indigenous people of color and boosting their businesses. So how does he find time for it all? How does he reconcile the family dynamic? His wife also is a very successful entrepreneur. We'll get to all that with Frantz Saintellemy in a few minutes. But first, our chat about current events. And Mike, in entrepreneur circles this week, there is one thing everyone's talking about, and that is banking. Silicon Valley Bank, and how they made a few miscalculations and ended up in a lot of trouble, causing, I suppose, what would you call this, Mike, a mini run on a bank? And are entrepreneurs concerned about runs on banks elsewhere? It seems to be a lot of panic involved in this story in the last few days.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, this was triggered at the end of last week and then just bolstered by Signature Bank's shuttering on last Sunday in New York State. And Signature Bank has been very, very heavily invested in the crypto market. I think we saw them advertise on TV in so many different ways on their bank cards associated to crypto. You know, the discussion of a run on the bank reminds me of, we've all watched It's a Wonderful Life over the years, and there's, the scene where everybody wants their money, and, you say, that doesn't happen in today's world. Well, unfortunately, that's pretty much what did happen last week. There's miscalculations, certainly, but I think one of the causes is there's two big effects. There was a lack of diversification, and not to their lenders, but a lack of diversification in how they lent money, invested money, and there was a lack of diversification in the fact that they're sitting in a sector that was predominantly tech. So I'm not sure that you can call that a lack of diversification when ultimately at the end of the day that was the purpose for the bank. What hit them? I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, you're talking about the Fed Reserve in the U.S. had a massive increase in interest rates, as we've dealt with in Canada as well, to try and curb inflation, which basically saw depositors able to move, money from an almost nil earning potential in an interest rate to, somewhere in that 2 3/4 and up U.S. Interest rate perspective. So if you had money sitting in a bank account, and it was earning nothing, and, you didn't bother putting it into a GIC, you didn't bother putting it into anything in the U.S. because there was nothing to be earned. All of a sudden, overnight, we watch the U.S. go from 1/4 to 4 3. What is it? 4.65, I think, was the jump in the U.S. within 12 months. And, excuse this expression, but SVB got caught with their pants down. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, they had a committed, ongoing, significant amount of deposits. And I think the difference here between what we know as a traditional bank run is this is more of a corporate bank run than it is an individual bank run. SVB had a huge amount of deposits that were coming from the startup sector, money that had been raised from investors who were holding, and SVB was holding on to these funds in order to invest going forward. What do you do? If you're a bank, money comes in, you turn around and you invest it. You live off the spread, and that's great. Well, when all of a sudden you've invested in long-term term deposits and GICs with the Federal Reserve or mortgage-backed securities at low rates, and there's this massive jump at the deposit level, all of a sudden there's no spread anymore. And it's hard to stay in business when all of a sudden you go to paying 2 3/4 to a depositor, but you're only earning 3 1/4 on your investments with nil liquidity because they're longer term investments. So you turn to the Fed for an overnight rate, and boom, it's 4.58% to pay the feds to keep going. And all of a sudden we see how a bank is in trouble. You combine that with, like we said, the run on funds, and it's been an interesting 10 days within the banking sector. The good news, I think, for those of us that started to have PTSD from 2007 and 2008's financial meltdown, is that the U.S. Fed and the governments will not spend public money on propping up the banks this time. Instead, it stepped in to cover deposits, guaranteeing above the FDIC insurance, which in the U.S. is $250,000. And this seems to have bolstered the market on the heels of Signature's bank close. I mean, there were so many people Sunday night and Monday morning before the markets opened wondering, is this going to be the meltdown that we've been, I don't want to say expecting, but fearing coming our way?
And it's not, right? I mean, as you mentioned, I think it's a very specific situation. It's in the name of the bank, right? Silicon Valley Bank. It's a specialty financial institution. For those that are in tech, Mike, or any kind of specialty industry, are you seeing a lot of these focused specialty lenders? And do you advise people to stick more with the old-fashioned generalist institutions that we're comfortable with?
Well, I'd love to say in Canada we had multiple options, but we really don't. So that kind of limits the, shall we call it, the option to go in different directions. Certainly, when the U.S. there's that specialty side of things. I think if you look in the U.K. and Britain, they have also got those opportunities, and I think that popped up quickly one night earlier this week when HSBC in the UK basically struck a deal with the government to buy the assets from Silicon Valley Bank UK for £1. And now that sounds like a great deal. Obviously, what it did is it gave the depositors a guarantee that they would continue to have access to their funds and continue to be able to play within the tech space that they're in. There will no doubt be some major gain at the end of the day for HSBC once this all settles out. But what it managed to do, and I think there was the urgency with which the government and HSBC came to a deal, was one that ultimately served to bolster the industry, allow the depositors to have access to their money based on an HSBC's massive banking footprint, and kind of took a lot of the fear out of that environment. And again, I don't see the U.S. government here propping up SVB. I think it's all going to come from, and you'll have a similar scenario where somebody here will buy that. Interestingly enough, the big, and I'll swing it back to your tech question, is that some of the big complaints in the UK came from a lot of banks that are specializing in the UK sector that were complaining that HSBC, because it's such a behemoth, had access to do a deal where maybe this would have been better to be sprinkled amongst other tech-centric banks in the UK to allow for a much more diversified market. I think the problem here is the UK government was facing a very simple decision: step in now, solve this, and any kind of deal where the smaller tech banks or individually or a consortium would have taken time, and I don't think the government wanted that time to have an effect on the marketplace.
Part, I think, of the problem that is destabilizing tech banking is crypto, from what I understand. And I want to tell you a story that happened to me this week, Mike. I had an entrepreneur. He asked me for my advice because he received a call in English from someone who wanted some money in order for him to access his crypto investment. Turns out his data was leaked. Someone was trying to scam him. I asked him, well, which crypto bank do you use? He didn't really know. He mentioned something, some generic kind of name. I Googled it, and there was only one alert. I think it was by the Alberta Regulatory Authority or something like that, so it's something very vague. But it appeared nowhere else. And as I was doing this research, I found that there were no alerts because there are so many crypto exchanges that are sketchy and that are frankly just taking people's money, that the regulators can't even keep up with the number of alerts they have to issue to warn people about them. I can't preach enough caution when you're dipping into the crypto market.
It's one of the issues that crypto has totally, baffled all of us in the depth and the width with which money and sizable investors have moved forward in is you're moving into an environment that has zero, let's maybe not zero regulation, but pretty close to zero regulation in a crypto market. So you're going to take a banking system, which we know in Canada is highly regulated. You're going to take a banking system in the U.S., which is not nearly as highly regulated as the Canadian banking system, but still has a very sophisticated underside to it in terms of what props it up and your reserves and everything else. And all of a sudden now you're going to throw crypto into this that has like I said, zero standards. I mean, we can't even agree to, how anybody's even going to assess that from a tax perspective and how a government or a different country is going to price all of this. So, it's a little bit like the Wild West out there in the crypto world. And I'm not saying that the crypto world is illegal and wrong. It just we need to find some kind of basis. And until such time as you get that, you're going to have what you're talking about. You're going to have a lot of rogue exchanges. You're going to have a lot of, unfortunately, rogue uses for crypto. It's funny. We've moved away from an environment and an economy that has really moved away from cash. Right? I mean, we'll call it the tech world, call it COVID, for whatever reasons. And the moment you reduce the cash, a lot of times you reduce a lot of that underbellied criminal involvement. Well, we've moved away from cash. We've gone into crypto. And, this is having a big effect. And you're right. This whole crypto discussion was really what brought Signature Bank down on Sunday. And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of people with a whole lot of investments just didn't know where to go.
Don't forget, we still don't know who invented Bitcoin. I think that's weird that we have a currency. No one knows where it comes from.
I pretty much think it's just somebody that wants to sit back and laugh and watch us all once again scramble as we try to create something from nothing. But hey, what do you want? No conspiracy theory here whatsoever.
And let's get right to our distinguished guests. His name is Frantz Saintellemy. He's the president and COO of Leddartech. That is an industrial sensor company. They do sensory applications for vehicles. We'll get into that. He is the co-founder of the BIPOC Entrepreneurship Incubator called Groupe 3737. And there's one more thing. He's the Chancellor of UDM, Université de Montréal. Frantz Saintellemy, welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs Montreal.
Hey, thank you for having me. Quite delighted to be with you today.
I want to quickly read a quote and have you react to it. This is from La Presse, who recently named you as one of the true influencers of Quebec. This is from François Cardinal. There are so-called influencers, those who sell their name and image, the highest bidders in social media like modern sandwich men. Then there are the real influencers, those who have a positive effect on society, who inspire, who encourage betterment, who use their title and reputation to collectively lift us up. How did it feel to hear those words written by La Presse, Mr. Saintellemy?
Well, I was surprised, but, it's a positive surprise. I'm a product of people who believed in me, who have pushed me in the background, who are not in the limelight. And I feel that success comes with the responsibility of, enabling others to achieve the same kind of success or even more success. So I think influencers in general or in the background are those that actually make things happen without getting the limelight or being in the limelight. And the fact that La Presse is recognizing my contribution in my own way to the ecosystem and to making society a better place, it's nice.
We're actually going to talk about two organizations, and we ask at the beginning that you define both, actually. And so let's deal with Leddartech in a second, but tell me about Groupe 3737.
Yeah, Groupe 3737 is an incubator accelerator that really focuses on establishing entrepreneurship development programs for people with immigration and diverse backgrounds. And the idea there is really to reverse the model. If you think of traditional acceleration program, it's sort of like a pyramid program where you're funneling the cream of the crop, the the smartest of the smartest into a 16-week program, and then you surround them with the best possible that the country can offer, and you hope that one or two comes out of it with a successful project. We think at Group 37, this model should actually be reversed. You should have the widest scope as possible, and in fact, go where it's unlikely to find entrepreneurship success in areas in subsectors of society where you most likely will not find the most successful, and then give them the tools to enable them to be successful. And that's what we did with the 3737. We built a program that was accessible to anyone who had an idea and a desire to be an entrepreneur. And we leverage our capabilities and our network and to create an acceleration program that is tuned for their capabilities rather than tuning for, let's say, an elite type of capability. And we founded the group in March 2012, and insofar we've actually been successful at accompanying more than 1,500 entrepreneurs across Canada. We've turned $20 million in private investments into $1.8 billion in value creation. And so we think that it's a huge success that doesn't necessarily require that much investment, but it does deliver sustainable success.
I just want to go back, maybe, Dan, for one quick second here to that article in La Presse, because I think that there's a lot of Mr. Saintellemy's, shall we say, history that really speaks to why the vastness. I mean, you've got a phenomenal educational background, which, I'd like you to maybe just touch on at some point. You've got a huge experience in the business industry in Canada, in the US, and in Germany. You're an individual who has a clear impact on the community. I mean, anybody who's surprised with the words that came from La Presse clearly doesn't know, I guess, the history that you bring with you. And I would like to take a little bit of a step back here. I mean, I know you graduated from Northeastern University in 1996, and I'm not going to do the math, but that goes back a few years at this point. And you've done an awful lot since then to get where you are today. I love your thirst for knowledge. I love your thirst to move things forward. What has driven you since you graduated from Northeastern in 1996, and what brings you to the point you're at today?
I think maybe it's synchronicity. I was always, I wasn't born in Canada. I was born in Haiti. And I think part of my thirst for knowledge was maybe I was not lucky in the beginning to have such access to huge playing field. And I think once I've discovered, through Northeastern, what they have this co-op program where students get to be working early on with companies on complex projects. I realized that I love complex problem solving. I realized that, all I had to do was to actually ask. And if I didn't know, if I would ask the right people, then I'd be given this access to this incredible knowledge or network of people that I could leverage to find knowledge. And I got hungry and hungrier for knowledge. If you look at, my early years, I was exposed to basically my neighborhood. And all of a sudden, I'm 18, 19, I'm exposed to the cream of the crop of technology industry. And to me, it's like a kid in a candy store when you have these people that are inventing the next technologies that everyone is using across the globe. And once I've figured that knowledge was cheap and accessible, then there was no stopping me. So I think that's probably, it starts with the fact that I didn't have access to it. And then all of a sudden I realized that I do have access to it. And it's dependent on me to acquire that knowledge. Then it became really, really interesting because I got exposed to the semiconductor industry. For some of your listeners who don't understand the value of semiconductors, I mean, what we're doing today, we're leveraging technology. Nothing happens without semiconductors. These transistors that are critical for your laptops, your cell phones, your microphones, your TV screens, or your fridge, or your stove, or your alarm system. All of these things require semiconductors. And I was building the semiconductors that were impacting people's daily lives. And that got me very interested in figuring out, okay, how can we leverage technology to augment human capacity? Can we leverage technology to actually do things, democratize access to deep technology, but to the vast majority, not the elite majority or those that have financial capacities. And so I also realized that you could, leverage technology to also level the playing field. So, today at a push of a button, we can send our message, this broadcast here, to billions of people potentially. And that's something you couldn't do 20 years ago. And that's through technology. And so I just became excited. And you can see I'm still excited by the possibilities.
I don't think the thirst for knowledge in an individual ever goes away. I mean, you made that point that it's dependent on you. And I think that's a lot of things that are lost from a lot of people today is they expect education or information to come to them, and you have to have that knowledge for it. And, when you said that we could push a button and get this radio show to 1 billion people, Dan's eyes got huge. So, Dan, I'm going to pass it over to you and let you take it from there.
That's a lot of pressure, but I would say that on the subject of tech, let's talk about Leddartech right now. And when you were explaining what a semiconductor is, a lot of people just don't know. I mean, there's a lot of education that has to take place there. So tell me how you got into the semiconductor space and how you use them in some industrial applications. I believe in automotive applications as well.
Right. So I got through the semiconductor space because of Northeastern. One of my co-op companies was this company called Analog Devices. So I started working right from the onset with mentors and engineers that had a significant impact. These were, let's say, what I would call fellows. These were industrial pioneers, and so the first products that I was working on was analog to digital converters. So essentially, human beings, we are in the analog domain, and the computer or the, let's say, the operates in the digital domain. So it's ones and zeros. We are into sines and waves. So heat, voice, sound, everything is analog. And so for the machine and the humans to collaborate or to connect, we need to convert the analog domain into the digital domain and vice versa, so that the machine can actually interact with humans. And that's how I got involved in, the audio industry. And so I started to develop technologies for voice, for sound, for digital media. And so we built technologies. And the whole idea was, at that time, can we take the professional sounds from the studio, professional media, and bring that same sound, voice, and image quality from the studio into your home, and then from your home into your car? So the same media can be come straight out of the production studio, and then it can operate in your home as well as in your car with the same quality. And so we built technologies for that, and it became a huge success. And that's how I really got involved in the automotive space. And now car infotainment is fairly standard. So you expect to have a digital map when you get into your car. You expect to have now voice activated commands. These were all because of these, what we call separate converters, analog to digital converters, digital to analog converters, and digital signal processors that we built at Analog Devices. And so now at Leddartech, what we're doing is we're taking it to another level. Can we use technology to give access to safety? So the way safety in automobiles work today, then, is it's at a premium. So your capacity to buy an expensive vehicle makes your vehicle more safe. So a Volvo XC90, which is a $150,000 car, is the safest car out there. But if you only have $30,000 to buy a car, your car isn't as safe. Now that's a tragedy. I don't subscribe to that. That to me means if we can make a smartphone for $1,000 that is more complex than any supercomputer out there, then why couldn't we make technologies that are accessible for the masses to save lives? There's 1.3 million people that die from benign car accidents. The number one culprit is the human error. And so if we could use technology to augment capacity of human beings to have a 360-degree peripheral view, and then help them identify and classify obstacles, help the vehicle make braking or steering decisions while the human being is still in control, then we can save lives. So at Leddartech, we develop software that recreates the environment in 3D, in a super high resolution, 30 times per second. So think about the human eye, we recreate the environment about 15 to 20 times per second. Well, this software allows to do that 30 times per second. And then we embed it into the vehicle so that the vehicle now has this 360-degree view of its environment, so that if you don't see in your blind spot, the vehicle always sees in the blind spot. So if there's somebody in your blind spot, it sees. If you miss the red light, the vehicle knows there's an obstacle in front of you, and it then allows the vehicle to make those intelligent decisions. So that's what we are building at Leddartech. It's software that's using an artificial intelligence and data that comes from your camera, from your radar, from your ultrasound software, but also from your map, and also from the interfaces that are in the vehicles, such as the door interface, the window interface, let's call it, wherever we can get data, we use that data, we process the data to help us recreate this unique environment for the vehicle. So think about what we do as the eyes and ears of the vehicle.
I find it fascinating. And Dan, after the break, I think we're going to come back on two topics that really just that grabbed me when I was going through all of this. Is the best explanation, I guess, Mr. Saintellemy, is the interactive demo dashboard on the website, which I thought was fascinating to drive people to maybe visualize what you're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And I'm a country boy. I grew up in the country. There's a use to this that goes beyond autos for industrial farming equipment and everything else.
Correct.
Mr. Saintellemy, thanks again for joining us. And let's start by just digging into the tech a little bit. So interesting applications in terms of safety for cars and other vehicles. But as Mike was saying, you can take this in a bunch of different directions. What other directions are you taking this technology in? And how else can we as humans better interact with the machines that are supposed to be serving us?
Right. So if you think of the context of, operator assistance or driver assistance. So in the passenger vehicle, we are building these driver assistance software and systems that helps the driver be safe, that's operating in the background continuously so that it keeps the driver safe at all time. Well, the same technology can be used for operator assistance. So Mike was talking about agriculture. So agriculture, mining, forestry, even construction. Labor shortage is a massive problem for these industries. In fact, cost of producing fruits and vegetables and all the food that we eat today, it's a real problem. Finding resources is a problem. So if we can now build these types of vehicles that can operate autonomously, or that can actually operate in a fleet by teleoperation. So you have one operator that's operating 2 or 3 machines at a distance. Or if you have a picker that actually can recognize, oh, that's an apple, and I can pick that apple automatically without having humans physically picking that apple. So you can have automated pickers. automated lifts, and so forth. So you have a number of applications where this can be applicable in, let's say, agriculture, forestry, mining, and construction. But even in your factories, there are many high-risk jobs today that requires human intervention that can be automated using the same software. Again, it's about recreating the environment so that the machine recognizes its environment, identifies, detects, and classifies the objects that are in the scene, just like you and I, we do. We identify, okay, that's a box, and I cannot walk over that box. And so you could do the same thing for the machine, for either a box picker or a robot, an industrial robot. So you could automate the factories and again, address issues of labor shortage, cost of production, and become more productive. Canada is a massive country. It's huge. There's more land than we can imagine. And it's impossible to cover all these lands. And it's impossible to to physically map all this land as well and keep the map up to date. So again, mapping is another example. You can use planes or drones or even robots to actually go and survey and map, and detecting the health of animals, safety of animals, mapping the environment, surveying the landscape. So I can go on. Medical applications. So again, imagine now we have shortages of nurses and doctors and surgeons. Imagine you can use the same technology now to automate, to recreate the organs, to recreate your body in 3-dimensional, to allow physicians to make faster decisions in terms of illness or surgeries. These technologies can be used across many, many industries.
Just to think, when I originally looked at all of this, I was looking at it also from the individuals around the equipment. So if we're talking farming equipment, you're talking a harvester. It's not that often that the driver of the harvester gets hurt, but it may be some of the workers that have been in the field or around the barn or on a construction site. So I think this is a fascinating application across the board. And, all I can keep thinking of when I look at all of this is this going to replace my wife critiquing my driving? Because if it is, sign me up right now. I want to take as much of this technology as I can get.
It's interesting. I get that a lot. So if you think about flying today, right? Flying, the pilot is assisting the robot that's flying. The pilot is there as a co-pilot for the automated system. It's the safest mode of transportation known to mankind today. But we don't have less pilots. In fact, we need more pilots. If anything, automated flying has accelerated, has reduced the cost of flying, has reduced the number of incidents, and has made it easier to build those planes, believe it or not, because you're building it in a context of automation, not in a context of human beings. And so therefore, you have a plethora of opportunities. So think about, driver assistance in the context of the driver for, let's say, 50, 60% of the time is distracted. Believe it or not, the driver is distracted 50, 60% of the time because we're not focused on all the things. Our minds drift in and out, whether we're on a conference call, whether we're looking at the land. We're not, the vehicle in itself, the automation system, can be 100% focused on the task all the time. It's not replacing the human being, but it's augmenting the human capacity and really allowing you to regain that time. That 50, 60% of the time where you're stressed trying to multitask, now you can be focused. You can actually have a real conversation because the vehicle is keeping you on that lane for you, is actually keeping you 99.9% of the time in your lane at 100 kilometers per hour or 95 kilometers per hour.
So I need you to get one of those for my bike. I have a hard time keeping it upright. Maybe it'll help.
There you go. Well, there are autonomous bikes that are out there.
We have to ask Frantz Saintellemy, you seem very busy. How much time of your day, how do you balance everything between a nonprofit and, of course, between academia as well, which can be very time consuming?
Yeah, being a professional technologist requires a lot of time and effort and dedication. And it's difficult to be successful if you don't have hobbies, if you don't have things that takes your mind away from the day-to-day grind of working. I work probably 10 hours a day on Leddartech, maybe 12 sometimes, my wife will tell me. And I need to disconnect. And disconnecting is really engaging with people, helping others. So this nonprofit Groupe 3737 allows me to get my mind off of complex technology problems. It gets while focusing on helping other human beings realize their dreams. Education, to me, we're all, as a society, what makes us a great society, what makes Canada unique is that higher education is accessible to everyone at low cost. And I'm a product of education. It's my fiduciary duty to give back to society, to the next generation, by helping improving education, by bringing my experiences into the university environment. So as chancellor and chair of the board of the University of Montreal, my role is really, on one hand, to be the ambassador for the university. Over the next 10 years, University of Montreal, one of the major charters is really to help the university become more innovative, more digital, more connected on a global basis, but also more local, connected to its community, be an actor for change in society. And so the research that we do at the University of Montreal is really about researching things that will impact society for many decades to come. But also at the same time, we have to be more productive as a society. We have to convert those research into innovation. So more entrepreneurial, more connected to real world, real life problems. And so to me, it's the most rewarding thing that I can do with my spare time is to help the university be more impactful to society.
It fascinates me. I am a little cerebral at times, and the amount of things that we do outside of our, shall you call it, as you called it, your 10 or 12-hour days, and whether that's philanthropy, all it does is continue to increase our brains, our contributions to society, and I guess part of the frustration I've had, and Dan, we have talked about this many times during COVID and everything else, has been, the people seem to have shut down on a lot of things. They're very restricted in what they're doing, looking more for a little more social time, that, dare I say, the work-life balance contribution. And the discussion that I have constantly is this: how can you be impactful? How can you make where we are a better place? And listening to you talk fascinates me, because I think there's a similarity. I certainly do not pretend to have the education and the background that you have, but that thirst for knowledge and that thirst for hunger is what keeps our society and our communities going. And I think hats off to you for not just the economic things that you have done, but I think the thought leadership and the brain power that you bring forward.
Yeah, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive, Mike. I do feel that we have to, as a society, what makes us so valuable as a society is the fact that we can offer cheap healthcare, cheap education, or I shouldn't say cheap because it sounds bad. Low cost healthcare, lower cost education, lower cost housing. We can afford to feed everyone. In many cases, even waste food, tragically. We can afford the things that we have that some other countries don't have, is the fact that our education system works. So we transfer knowledge, we give tools to kids, at a young age until they become adult, and then they go back to society and contribute back to that same society that helped bring them up. And I think what we can't lose sight of is we need to be productive. We need to innovate. We need to sell more products. We need to develop more products. And we also need more tools and equipments that are necessary to augment our own capacity so we become more productive. And that gets recycled back into, the healthcare, in social services, in education, in all the things, in policing, in keeping our borders safe. So we can't lose sight of that. And I think part of what you're mentioning, it speaks to me, because we're talking about work-life balance. And, I give 10 hours to Leddartech, but I also give 3-4 hours to, let's say, the university or Groupe 3737. In fact, we as society, we always think that the for-profit is the most important thing. We've got to work for profit, but society doesn't function if you don't have social entrepreneurs. If you do not have these social workers, these people that are working in the healthcare system with mental health, that are these teachers and professors, if we don't equip them with the right tools so that they can properly educate our children, society is dysfunctional. And I think this is where we've lost sight of what makes society great, is we focus on the for-profit, but it's at the expense of social work. And we all have responsibility on the social side. Education is a perfect example of that.
I totally agree. And my problem with the term work-life balance, which goes back, it's one of those words we're not allowed to say around, Mike, is because the term, to me, defines a delineation between being on and being off. Okay. And to me, that's not the way we should be. I agree that, work and the for-profit component, but we need to redefine life to a certain degree. And I think that redefining life is perfectly what you've expressed today is that contribution outside. It just because it's not sitting behind your desk or under your normal, 9 to 5 or 7 to 7 job, what do you do with your spare time? What do you do with that time that is off the clock type of thing? And I think that's what has a huge advancement within our society. And, it's why one of my first questions to you was this thirst for knowledge, and this, that there's so much that goes with this that is, way beyond dollars and cents and advancing technology. It really is about the human condition to a very large degree.
Indeed. Especially in this digital day and age we are. I have imagined that I meet some kids who tell me they know how to read, they know how to count, they know how to write, but they're illiterate in an increasingly digital world.
Don't ask for change at the store.
Right? So this is where we lose sight of this divide that's being created. And this is where we need social entrepreneurship. We need education to bridge that gap, because, to a certain degree, what I'm doing at Leddartech and what I did previously is only a vehicle for me to do more of the other stuff. If I'm doing Leddartech only to build my bank account, then as a human being, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. But it's what gets rewarded. If I didn't have Leddartech, people wouldn't necessarily be talking about me. If I didn't have ZMD before that, people wouldn't be necessarily talking about me. So this is where I think when you say work-life balance, I think it's more or less, how do we define success? Is success because I have this bank account or I delivered X products that were sold? Or is it success where I've actually helped my environment be a better place? I have helped other human beings be more successful. I think we need to think through as a society, what are the things that are most important? But innovation on both sides, innovation socially, because without social innovation, we don't have Medicare. We don't have universal education accessible to everybody. That's social innovation, ladies and gentlemen, where we can also have for-profit innovation, making your cars safer, making, When you go to work, you don't have to bend as much as we used to lift things that wouldn't be acceptable today. If you had to lift 100 pounds 50 times a day, it wouldn't be acceptable. Well, technology has enabled us to do that. That's innovation. And on both sides, they're equally as important. And what I'm saying here, if you do one more than the other, there's this unbalance, and this imbalance creates chaos.
I would love to hear the work-life balance term change to impact. What's my impact in the world? And I think that would probably make me feel a little more comfortable than using work-life balance.
And a little bit more for our podcast audience now with Frantz Saintellemy from UDM, Leddartech, and as well Groupe 3737 on inspiring young entrepreneurs, especially Gen Zs and your students, the people that are in the halls at UDM, Frantz Saintellemy. I wonder about how Gen Zs especially are performing during the pandemic. I feel like as a nation, we may have missed some opportunities there. What are you hearing in the halls? And what words do you have to inspire 20-somethings especially who feel that their careers have been interrupted by recent times?
There's the biggest piece of advice that I can give to someone today that's starting out is dare to make mistakes. If you're not trying something that's super hard, super complicated, then you're not going to grow as much as your potential could allow you to. And I think it's so easy to fall into comfort because we reward success. We don't reward failure. We live in a society where failure isn't as positively viewed as success. But I've learned more from my failures than any success that I've had. I've grown more than during my failures than during any success that I've had. And so my failures have allowed me to travel the world because, I've dared to try something different. And somebody from across the globe in Germany said, hey, can you come and try that in Germany? Because we think that you could be successful in Germany. And I've done that in the US. I've done that elsewhere. And I think every time that I've tried something super complex, something where everybody has said it's impossible to do, I've always came out on top, because the worst that happened to me is I've actually landed closer to the final objective. And that's usually way more than the vast majority. So dare to push the boundaries, dare to try something different, get out of your comfort zone, fail. It's okay, fail.
Wow, thank you very much. Powerful words. Frantz Saintellemy, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. You are the Chancellor of Université de Montréal, Chair of the Board there as well, co-founder of Groupe 3737, and President and CEO of Leddartech. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Mike, any other follow-up questions? Last ones for the podcast? Or?
Sorry, I just want you to mark the time that you said CEO. Just the last one.
Oh, did I just say, I didn't say COO?
Mark the time.
Okay, got it. I thought I said COO, but noted. Sorry about that. Great. Well, Mike, thank you again.
I was just the only point I was going to raise, I think, was in your piece of advice is it's not just the failure component; it's the learning component that comes with it. A lot of people fail and quit. And, the side of being able to fail and recognize your mistake and move on and try and either not repeat it or move in a different direction is the entrepreneurial spirit at the end of the day. There's an awful lot of people I know who fail and just walk away and turn around and give up, and I think that I
thought about that, it's okay to fail, just learn from it and redo it again.
Yeah, you keep trying to explain that to my kids. There's nothing wrong with failing, but you just keep going until you get it. Once you've got it, then you can quit.
Well, the one analogy that I like to make is between sports and entrepreneurship. So athletes, they fail 99.9% of the time. But that 1% or that 0.1% of success is what we get to see. That's when they're in the Olympics. They break the records. That's when they're in the NBA and making buzzer beater shots. So they fail. And another example is bodybuilding. For you to grow muscles, you got to destroy the old muscles. You got to break the muscles. And for you to learn, you actually have to break, some old institutional knowledge or comfort zone to rebuild. So you got to erase and rewrite in order to actually learn something new. So, these failure is actually, it's the most fundamental part of growing. Is you've got to learn through your failures, and it's such an misunderstood mechanism. Research is all about trial and error.
Yeah. So if you couch it as research, it's okay.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that's the way our society accepts it.
Or training.
Yeah, or training. Like I said, you got beat. Okay, that's good, but it doesn't really count because it's training. Like it's
Yes.
when you're, I had somebody explain to me years ago after 19 years sitting as managing partner of Fuller, and I got to tell you that I've made more mistakes than I've gotten right. But I'm a firm believer in execution. I'm a firm believer in decision making as part of the errors. And if somebody explained it to me one day, the conversation was a simple one. He said, compare yourself to another individual. So you're going to make 100 decisions, and you're going to get 50, 60 of them right. Okay. And somebody else is going to take their time over the course of a year and make one decision and get it right. So if you go with the statistical model we were brought up with, the other individual has got a better average, right? They made one decision, they got one thing right. He said, look at it this way. He said, if you went to bat 100 times for the New York Yankees and you hit the ball 60 times, do you have any idea how much money you would be making?
Legend.
He said, and that's a very active discussion, right? It's you can have made or no decisions and never be wrong. Okay? And you're not the man in the arena mentality where you're willing to stand on a limb. And I applaud you for this, because I think that this is a phenomenal message. And it just cut, didn't.
We heard most of that, but I think it was
all right.
Yeah, it's but we need to create a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
We need to also get away from the traditional review processes. So you had to deliver 10 things and you delivered only 7. Yeah, but the 3 that I missed, they're the ones that are creating value, because those ones will stay forever, because we won't make those mistakes again, because we've learned from them, right? That's value creation. But the way we also do evaluations is we do linear when it should be horizontal, because if you measure me by what I did only, that's severely understating my impact. Severely, because I do horizontal growth. I know a little bit and I pass it on to a lot of people. That little bit becomes a lot. Right?
The exponential nature of what you're doing.
Encouraging collaboration, encouraging knowledge transfer, encouraging dialogue and communication. How much have I done, throughout the year that I've worked with this group to transfer knowledge across the board, to create an environment where team actually does more than the sum of the individuals. That's how we should. It sounds so simple, but that's why can't we do it?
We take term, and we have to find a way to be in businesses as we have in profit sector. And I go back to the word right, as a charity, as a social, looking to make an impact, to be making the same impact on a business basis as well.
One last question. Speaking of knowledge transfer, talk about your family and your kids. Your wife is a successful entrepreneur in her own right. Vicky Joseph of V Cosmetics. They were making lines of cosmetics for people of color for a while now, before the big corporations started on that trend in recent years. First of all, a lot of pressure on your kids probably to tell me about the atmosphere at home. Do they feel that pressure? And how do you guys as a family manage your time?
It's a very good question. In fact, I don't think we see pressure. What we see is, we're problem solvers. We like to tackle problems, and our children are part of what we do every day. Actually, they're participating in these activities, so they know exactly what we're trying to do, what we're doing, and they also know how they can contribute. So, in fact, we learn from them. They ask questions. Why are we doing it that way? Why not that way? So for example, we don't use the term using for people of color. It came from our daughter. She said, we're developing products for people who have atypical skin types. And that's so true. And she's 14, by the way. But in her mind, anyone can use the products, especially those that have atypical skin types. And it's so true. It's the pigmentation that determines if you need, whether you're white or black or yellow, whatever your skin tone might be. It's your individual skin requirements that makes the product useful. And so this is coming from a 14-year-old child. And so by involving them in the discussions in the business, we learn so much. We also learn through our kids that they don't need us to do that much more. They just need to be involved. They just need to be part of. They don't feel the urge of us playing with them versus working with them or versus involving them. They feel that they're part of whatever we're doing and they enjoy it. So I don't see it as pressure. I think the pressure comes from them wanting us to involve them more.
Well, that'll do it. Thanks so much for the extra time on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Awesome show. Thank you so much. We could talk for hours, just the two of us.
Indeed.
We'll have the one piece of advice from our distinguished entrepreneur in a few minutes, Frantz Saintellemy from Groupe 3737, Leddartech, and in his spare time, Chancellor of Université de Montréal. So his one piece of advice on the way, plus lots of extra material on the podcast for you with him as well. But let's get to our expert. His name is Jean-François Audet, Transaction Services Partner at BDO Canada, and we're going to talk about how businesses can prep for tough economic times ahead. Welcome back, Jean-François.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
And those transactions, have they started to drop off yet? Are we in pre-recessionary times?
It's you know what, Dan, if I had a crystal ball, that would be such an easy question, but there is no such thing. If you just look at the key metrics out there, inflation is starting to come down a bit from the heights of June 2022. Now we're around 6%, still targeting to attain 2%. Interest rates, the Fed mentioned that they're still open and increasing the rate. The Bank of Canada this week, they just kept the rate at the same level. We're still having issues in the supply chain, not as bad as what we've seen in the last few months, but still some struggle. Same with the labor market. And one other component that is worth mentioning, we don't have any more free money in the market. So companies now, they're pretty much left on their own. They need to figure out how they're going to make it in this, I don't want to say hostile environment, but certainly uncertain environment and challenging environment. And if I just had a layer to this, if we're just looking in terms of insolvency filings, it's still relatively low from the heights that we've seen back in 2029, 28, when it was a financial crisis. And we're not even back to the levels that we've seen just before the pandemic. So a lot of uncertainty looking forward. But again, pretty hard to predict what's going to happen in the next few months.
To add insult to injury, JF, I mean, we're getting a Canadian dollar that's weakening against the U.S. dollar. Why? The Canadian government has basically stated they're going to keep interest rates where they are. And the American government now, with their continued fears of inflation, they're talking that they may raise interest rates again. And once that spread between the Canadian and the U.S. interest rate drops, so does our Canadian dollar. And this is a concern, I think. We've already started the topic of conversations with a number of clients recently on their concern of what should I be pricing and how I should be factoring in the Canadian dollar over the next little while? Are you, what's your feeling? I'm not going to ask you where you think the dollar is going to go, but what do you think that impact of a weakening dollar, as well as the amount of time and energy people have to go back to putting into looking at trying to cost in an environment that's questionable?
Listen, it's certainly going to be challenging, but I think it's going to be good news for our businesses exporting worldwide. But those companies that are not exporters, that's likely going to be tough. But I think facing those uncertain time, you need to have the proper tools in your toolbox. And I think one of the things, you need to have that clear vision of what you want to do, what you want to accomplish with your business. And it's not just having the idea. You need to lay it down on paper and have a solid business plan. You need to have projections. You need to set milestones. And it's not a document that you have to leave on the corner of your desk. It has to be a living document. You need to track the progress. And really, at the end of the day, I mean, that's how you're going to be able to assess the progress. And again, and as the guest before me said, I mean, it's okay to make mistakes, and you just need to adapt as you're moving along into the process. But I guess one of the big thing also, aside from having that plan and having projections and being able to have something that is flexible enough so you can navigate and adapt as you move along, you need to be able to differentiate yourself in a marketplace and create that uniqueness or that attractiveness, so you can go in within that with that in a hostile environment or that uncertain environment. But no, that definitely you need to come prepared. I mean, that would be probably the worst mistake to do, to take that lightly. You need to gear up. You need to prepare and to face those uncertain times.
Jean-François Audet, Transaction Services Partner at BDO Canada. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you very much.
And as usual, as we get to the end of our show, we turn to our entrepreneur, Frantz Saintellemy of Groupe 3737, COO of Leddartech, Chancellor of Université de Montréal, and we ask him for his one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs, sir.
There's the biggest piece of advice that I can give to someone today that's starting out is dare to make mistakes. If you're not trying something that's super hard, super complicated, then you're not going to grow as much as your potential could allow you to. And I think it's so easy to fall into comfort because we reward success. We don't reward failure. We live in a society where failure isn't as positively viewed as success. But I've learned more from my failures than any success that I've had. I've grown more than during my failures than during any success that I've had. And so my failures have allowed me to travel the world because, I've dared to try something different. And somebody from across the globe in Germany said, hey, can you come and try that in Germany? Because we think that you could be successful in Germany. And I've done that in the US. I've done that elsewhere. And I think every time that I've tried something super complex, something where everybody has said it's impossible to do, I've always came out on top, because the worst that happened to me is I've actually landed closer to the final objective. And that's usually way more than the vast majority. So dare to push the boundaries, dare to try something different, get out of your comfort zone, fail. It's okay, fail.
Wow, thank you very much. Powerful words. Frantz Saintellemy, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. You are the Chancellor of Université de Montréal, Chair of the Board there as well, co-founder of Groupe 3737, and President and CEO of Leddartech. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And before we go, don't forget, for all tech entrepreneurs out there, that applications are open for BDO's VC Pitch Day. So this gives selected emerging tech companies exclusive opportunities to pitch their business to incredible venture capital investors in May 2023. Visit go.bdo.ca/VCday for details. And don't forget, you can subscribe to Inspiring Entrepreneurs Montreal as a podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or your favorite platform. And you can also log on to the website, inspiringentrepreneursmtl.com, for hundreds of local entrepreneur profiles from the last 15 years. See you next week.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.